that have been taking place. Of course, we've seen skirmishes take place in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and then also Yemen, Houthis launching missiles towards Israel that was intercepted by the United States warships in the region. The Iranians, the only thing we've heard around this is from Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was speaking before these events even began last Tuesday, where he said that the Muslim nations are angry. He said that it is not going to be easy to control people's feelings and that it could possibly result in the events that we've seen unfold, various groups taking it upon themselves to act out against U.S. interests in the region, because the Supreme Leader, along with other officials, blame not only Israel, but mainly the United States for their unconditional support of Israel and enabling it to carry out these war crimes that it's been carrying out over the past 2 weeks. So there hasn't been any direct comments, but certainly the sense here is that these incidents will likely continue and possibly escalate.
All right, we'll leave it there. Let's thank Dorset Jabari, live from Tehran. Talking about some of those attacks and incidents, armed groups have launched rocket and drone attacks on US bases in Iraq this week. They say it's in response to Washington's support for Israel. The US State Department has now advised its citizens not to travel to Iraq. Mahmoud Abdelwahid reports from Baghdad.
As fear is rising that the war on Gaza might spill over across the Middle East, in Iraq, military bases hosting US and coalition military personnel have been targeted by missiles and drones. Iran-backed armored groups known as the Islamic Resistance have claimed responsibility for the attacks, threatening to increase their attacks and to continue targeting US military facilities and US interests in Iraq as long as the United States continues supporting and backing Israel's military campaign on Gaza. In Iraq, also, demonstrations have been staged across the country, condemning the military campaign by Israel on Gaza, and many political and religious leaders in Iraq have been calling on the government to boycott countries that support Israel. In fact, they have been calling on the government to close embassies and diplomatic missions of the countries that support Israel. Several political and religious leaders in Iraq have been calling on their supporters to mobilize towards the border, in fact, to be transferred to Palestine, to take part in the resistance, to take part in the defense of Palestinians, of civilians in Gaza. Iraq has been one of the first countries in the world to rise up against the bombardment campaign by Israeli forces against Gaza. Mahmoud Abdelwahid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
The US has introduced a draft resolution to the UN Security Council on the war on Gaza, but it doesn't call for a ceasefire. Instead, the draft resolution calls for full respect of international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilian populations trying to get to safety. It also strongly urges the continuous, sufficient and unhindered provision of essential goods and services to civilians in Gaza, including water, fuel, food and medical supplies. Well, this is the third draft resolution issued since the conflict began. Previous ones by Russia and Brazil were vetoed. Gabriel Elizondo is at the United Nations in New York. So take us through the text of this resolution, which does not include a ceasefire.
Yeah, it does not, and that's one of the big criticisms of this from Security Council members. I'll get to that in 1 second, Sammy. I just want to mention as well some new information confirmed that we're getting in from the United Nations, confirming, this is from Martin Griffiths, the head of the UN Relief and Emergency Office, and he says that 14 more trucks have entered Gaza today meaning Sunday, through the Rafah border crossing with the aid provided by the Red Crescent and UN. He says it's another small glimmer of hope for the millions of people in dire need of humanitarian aid. He says, I'm particularly grateful for the aid workers on the Palestinian side who immediately sprang to action to offload the goods despite the risks. They are true heroes. They, too, need protection. So that's from Martin Griffiths from the UN, confirming 14 more aid trucks have gotten into Gaza. Clearly not even close to enough, less than 1% of what's needed, but that's the latest info from the UN. Now, going to the Security Council and the United Nations, United States draft resolution, it does not mention in it any form of a ceasefire, but what's particularly notable is it also does not even mention a humanitarian pause. And that is something that most of the Security Council members say that they want and that they've already voted for in the Brazil resolution last week that was vetoed by the United States. So already we've heard from the United Arab Emirates that are saying that the U.S. draft resolution is, in their words, very unbalanced, overly in favor of Israel at the expense of Palestinian civilians. We've heard from other diplomats behind the scenes as well, saying that this U.S. draft resolution, in their words, misses the mark. So when this will be voted upon, we don't know. There's no schedule of vote right now, but it could come in front of the Security Council for a vote as early as Monday or possibly even Tuesday.
And when it comes, Gabriel, what are the chances of this being third time lucky?
Well, the way the draft is written now, very unlikely that it would pass. Security Council members have today to issue their responses and or addendums, if you will, to the U.S. draft. We don't know what those are yet, but you can bet there's going to be a lot of red ink on this draft from other members of the Security Council. But listen, the Security Council has been pretty clear that they want something that has a humanitarian pause in it. 12 members already voted for that in the Brazil draft that was vetoed by the Americans. So the chances of this passing now, unless the Americans make some sort of concessions, seems quite low at this point.
All right, thanks so much, Gabriel Elizondo.